This is the East Coast branch of the Ricci family. The others are going to fly in from the West Coast, but a little expensive with Grandma and Grandma would have to put the airfare.
Try to do it far away so that your family can meet in picture. All right, good, get close. Get close. I, Fred Ricci,
I, Fred Ricci,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of mayor
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of mayor
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
It's, I think it's kind of ironic that Mark spoke of thinking of his mother at this time, because the real irony is that I've been involved in public service for 24, 25 years, and my father never knew that. And I think he would have been quite pleased to be at any one of the swearings in. And I've been doing a lot of reflecting through the whole campaign. There are so many people to thank, and obviously my wife, who went to many, many, many doors with me, and probably was the reason I did well.
You learned from Carrie.
Standing here. But those reflections, during those reflections, I kept asking myself, why did I do this? Is my rationale valid? During the last couple of years, I became a little bit of a social networking kind of person and discovered something called the East Rochester Connections on Facebook. And what that was, I believe, a former ER resident, Ann Discavage, probably graduated in the early 70s from East Rochester, started a group on Facebook in which people who still lived here, had moved on to other places, or just wanted to reminisce and think about their past, did so using that medium. And it was wonderful. Remembering that nativity scene as it came out, when it used to say Merry Christmas over the manger. Remembering the buildings that used to stand where Technoplex was, without bitterness, just with fond remembrance. And it was during the course of that kind of remembrance that I said, well, what's really important about this town? Has it really changed? You know what? I think it has not. Because what stays the same is the character of the people involved. And it's that character that had me believe that it was my turn to step up and help us begin to believe that again. Because we can enforce the codes, and we can get grants and fix the houses, and we can do all we can programmatically to move this village forward. And believe me, we're determined to do that. And this board is as capable, if not more capable, than any board in our history. We will do that. But what's missing in all the political rhetoric we might have heard is that the culture, the people who live here, need to find those common ties again. They're there. When I was a kid, it was easy. I sat on the front porch of a house that's no longer there, on the corner of Washington Street and Chestnut. And I watched as the whistle blew at 4 o'clock, employees of the Piano Works leave work. I didn't understand as a 5 or 6-year-old why they were so darn happy. It was the end of the work day. But that's who we were. We were those people who left the Piano Works, who left the car shops, who left the paper mill, and went to their homes, for the most part, right here in East Rochester. It was possible to live in ER, to work in ER, and not even own a motor vehicle. Okay? Now that doesn't speak of a very wealthy suburb, does it? That speaks of a great community. And there's still enough of that here. We're 1.3 square miles, maybe 6,300 people. We're diverse, and believe me, we were diverse back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s as well. Don't let anyone tell you that we are all alike, that we share this brotherhood. We had our share of arguments, whether they were, cultural, social, political. Mrs. Dinetti can tell you about politics back, maybe not that far back. So we've always had our differences, and we've always used those actually to our advantage over the years. And it just occurred to me that this really isn't about the adults in the room. This is about the kids, because if we're comparing one generation to another, saying, well, we used to be better. Things were great when I was a kid because we had the candy kitchen to go to. Yeah, that was pretty good. But that did not define childhood. What defined childhood was how much the adults in this community cared for the kids who lived here. In the 13 years I went to school in this district, there was one snow day. I'm not exaggerating. If you're my age or about that one snow day, and I might have been about 6th or 7th grade, because I remember my sister Carol and I were walking toward the East Avenue schools. So there was no high school yet. And someone on the 500 block of West Avenue poked their head out the door and said, "Kid, there's no schools today. Too much snow." I mean, the wind was blowing, there was 3 feet on the ground. We did not believe her. We kept going, we said, well, what if there is no school? No, how could there be no school? This is East Rochester. We got a little further, and a second and a third person poked their head out and said, no school, and then we were smart enough to realize that we should turn around and go home. There were no other kids walking. But that was a community showing in a very small way how much it cared about its kids. Not just one person, but a second and a third. Kids, go back home. A Lutheran minister, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, before World War II, said, the test of a moral society is the world that it leaves, the kind of world that it leaves its children. And that's the test I think we should face here in East Rochester. Yeah, we'll fix the buildings, we'll fix the roads, the sewers, but let's make this the kind of place that our kids will always want to come back to, whether they're able to or not. Make them want to be here. The school system communicates well enough with us so we can make this possible. This is a great place to live, a great place to grow up. So that's our charge. That's the charge I'll make to this board, and I know they'll take it up because I know what they feel for East Rochester. And we'll do the best we can to make you happy that you chose East Rochester, or if you're not here now, you'll come back. Again, that social networking. The younger brother of a really good friend of mine was on that East Rochester connection, talking about childhood memories and how wonderful they were. So I challenged him and I said, Frank, move back. His response was, I never left. And you'd be surprised how many people, he lives in Maine. I have a former student who lives in the state of Washington, made pretty much the same claim. I never left. He wants me to send him a Bomber football t-shirt so that every Friday night, after he finishes his classes at the University of Oregon State, he can put that shirt on and know that in spirit, he's watching a game here in East Rochester on a Friday night. Lastly, I don't know if I can admit to this, but Harry Truman was kind of a special person for me. You won't know too many people who will say that. Growing up, it should be John Kennedy, or it could be any one of a number of others. Harry Truman was my guy. Now, you know him for having said things like, if you can't stand the heat, you get out of the kitchen, or the buck stops here. Well, everything he ever said is kind of true of what I believe about government. The buck does stop here, but it's a little-known quote from President Truman. And by the way, President Truman was the 33rd president, and I know that because Bob Eisenthal hung a calendar in my office today with every president. It is the ugliest thing you'd ever want to see. But I did use it as a quick reference. But Truman said, Imagine what wonderful things we could do if you didn't care who got the credit. Think about that. And as a community, I think we're ready for that approach. I think we're ready to forget who gets credit for what, and we're ready to go forward. And I thank you for coming out to vote. I don't care who you voted for, because I know what the results are, so I can say that, right? But thank you for coming out tonight. And now I'm going to take a motion to adjourn so that we can go into the boardroom and finish up here. Thank you.